1997, she wrote a novel which became very famous and was translated into 27 languages, including Thai. Was translated by me, and that's why I have to tell you that she is my... I'm a fan of Soe Yen Lee. I know all of her works, both in the kind of short stories and also the novels. After the Poland Room, das Blütenstaubzimmer, the first novel, which made her very famous and travel all and gave her the chance to travel around the world. She had 3 more novels. Now I have to see the title in English because okay, The Call of the Conch, Share a Fast Life, and The Portrait, because I do it in German language. And last year, and then today we will hear from her first English language novel, The Sky is Changing. But last year she also wrote short stories which called Spätestens Morgen or Tomorrow at the Latest. But because she's very special, she became very famous because of her novel. But after that she lived in many countries. That's why she has very much experience, a lot of experience in Bali, New York, Berlin, London, and China too.
I was just traveling there.
Okay, not officially, but many places, and I think she brought everything into her stories. Today we are going to hear her story, The Sky is Changing. It is written in English and it's very special because most of the German-speaking authors write only in German, and so Yen Lee wrote a book in English, and that's why you have the chance to hear today.
Thank you very much. Actually, I don't think I need this. Do you need it? No, you hear it? This is okay? Yeah? Oh, you want to record this?
Because the recording.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much for the invite and for coming this evening. I want to say it's a very special place because it looks a bit like the living room I grew up in. My father had a lot of books, and he was a publisher himself, and so I grew up obviously with a lot of books, and we had no TV, but I was reading a lot from the very start of my life, and sometimes this place reminds me a little bit of my childhood, with all these books around, and a cozy place. So it's very nice to be here, and I want to present The Sky is Changing, a special book for me because it was very hard to write. I had to wait a long time to be able to write it because obviously it's not very easy to learn another language which is not your mother tongue in a way that allows you to write in it, because you have to learn it in a way that you are able to dream in it. You have to be able to to write it. Like it has to be your mother tongue as well. Like the second language. And so yes, it was. I had to wait for about 7 years to be able to write a story. There are 2 main characters in the book. It's Anthony and Claire, which are in the mid-30s. She was a former ballet dancer in Berlin. She had a career very early on, and is now ready to have a family. She wants to have a child. With Anthony, who is works at a city in London. The novel is set in London, which is important because the city itself is like a character. And he works as a city analyst in the city is like the Wall Street in New York is in London, it's similar. So he works in that area, and it is set in a time when the financial crisis hit, with the closing of the Lehman Brothers Bank when they went bankrupt. So this is time it's set. It's also the same time when terrorist attacks, where we had terrorist attacks in the bombings, where 52 people died in the tubes in London, and 30 in a bus. And so I tried to capture the atmosphere of that time in London, and I found it very interesting the way that the city changed and those people changed into that city during that time. And I was just trying to capture that moment, because it influenced me quite strongly, especially this fear, you know, that after the terrorist attack, everyone was quite tense, and so I wanted to capture that as well. So I will just start with the opening scene, a few pages, and then you can ask questions or just talk about it. The rose bush was already there when they moved in. Someone must have planted it many years ago. Perhaps it had only been a little plant back then, and the person who put it in the earth never had a chance to see it in full bloom. Intertwined with the passion flower, the roses had climbed up and covered almost half of the brick wall at the back of the garden. The scarlet and purple flowers were so vibrant, it surprised Claire that something so beautiful was able to grow in this little dark backyard, and she couldn't help but hesitate before she snipped off a bunch of roses with the secateurs. There was something sacrilegious about it, like when she had taken that glorious orchid while on a walk, which had then wilted it by the time they got home. Why did she have to take it? Wasn't it enough just to look at it? But this time, the flowers weren't for herself. Claire looked up into the bright blue sky and followed the white jet stream of a plane leaving London. How quickly this year had passed, she thought. How good the world was at looking normal and concealing its tragedies. "Let's go," Anthony shouted from inside the kitchen. "I haven't got all day." Claire smiled, as she knew that while it sounded as if he had something very important to do, he just wanted to be back in time for the match. "You don't have to come, you know, I can go by myself," she said. He didn't even answer, just rushed out of the house instead. It was a hot, humid day. City Road was jammed with traffic, and the line of buses moved sluggishly forward like a herd of ancient animals slowly dying in the sun. "Don't you want to try it again?" Anthony asked tentatively when they reached Upper Street, Angel Tube Station just a few steps away. "It's only one single stop to King's Cross, you know." Claire shook her head. "You don't want me to have a heart attack, do you?" It happened shortly after the bombings a year ago, somewhere on the Northern Line. It was rush hour, and Claire had found herself pushed to the back of the carriage, unable to move. People were swaying with every turn, and she could feel the cumulative weight of the passengers smothering her. Her heart was racing in her chest so hard it was as if a living creature was trying to get out. "Calm down, for God's sake," she said to herself, but her heart just went faster. The noise of creaking metal and rattling wheels cutting through the darkness at high speed gave her drowning sensation. Staring at the door and counting the seconds, she remembered the expression, "soft target." She could die here with all these strangers, in an instant, just like that. The fear and aggression in the air was almost palpable. Everyone on survival. Suddenly something inside her changed, a sudden diffusion of chemicals in her brain. She had to get out of there right then. With both her elbows, she pushed people aside. Someone swore at her, "Stupid bitch," but she didn't care. She was someone else now, brutish, raw, animal-like. She would have punched anyone who dared to stand in her way. These weren't people anymore, just obstacles, stinking, hateful flesh. When Claire had finally emerged from the tube, stepping into the daylight, she was covered in sweat and out of breath, her mouth dry. Stumbling into the toilet of a nearby Starbucks, she looked at her face in the mirror. It wasn't just pale, it was as white as a sheet. Her knees weak and shaky, completely exhausted, she sat on the lid of the toilet seat to recover. She propped her head in her hands, ashamed of herself. She couldn't believe that she had behaved like that. For a brief moment, she had actually lost her mind. After that incident, Claire had decided to never ever go down there again, and was relieved that Anthony didn't insist on using the tube. Even though he was convinced it was just one of her fads that would be forgotten with time, he had bought her a scooter as a gift. Pentonville Road was a long stretch, and Claire carried the flowers head down so they couldn't wilt as quickly in the heat. Anthony checked his BlackBerry, and there was a happy birthday greeting from his mother. He read it somewhat disappointed, as if he had expected it to be from someone else. Claire felt sorry for him that they had to do this on his birthday, that this was a day of grief for so many. She could see other people with flowers now, someone even carrying a giant teddy bear under his arm. A large crowd had gathered just a few meters to the right of King's Cross station entrance. There was a little square behind some railings with a tree in the middle, at night a seedy place where drug dealers and prostitutes hang out. Now there were dozens of people creating a temporary memorial, and Anthony and Claire joined the queue, waiting for their turn. A security guard made sure that not everyone went in at once. Policemen were protecting the site, batons and guns at the ready. Most people just laid down their flowers and left, but some were kneeling in front of a photograph or wreath praying. Even though King's Cross was a busy, noisy spot, on this particular day there was a strange silence, interrupted only by announcements from the loudspeakers inside the station. Claire was looking at the photographs and children's drawings. There were flowers everywhere, some still wrapped in foil, sweating away in the sun, releasing their sweet, heavy scent. The smell of death, Claire thought, and she laid the roses next to a photograph mounted on a piece of cardboard. It showed a young girl with short blonde hair. Underneath, in big red letters, was written, "Why?" A man next to her wept, holding on to a picture of a woman, almost tearing it apart. Suddenly he let go of it and left, looking around with darting eyes. He appeared completely lost, as if in panic, not knowing where to go. Eventually he disappeared into the shadowy hall of the station. They didn't talk on their way back. One of the reasons she loved him so much was that Anthony always seemed to know when it was time to be silent. She touched his hand with her finger briefly and gently, as if to reassure herself it was real, that if needed there was his hand she could grab and hold on to. The noise of the football on the telly filled the afternoon. It was a welcome distraction and had the comforting sound of normality, the rhythm of everyday life. Claire was in her room upstairs, sitting at a desk by the window surfing the internet. There were speeches and readings in Regent's Park and several other events all over London. She found a website with photos and a short biography for each of the 52 victims. There it was again, the picture of the blonde girl. She was from Poland, 27 years old, and had been on her way to work that morning, perhaps thinking of her next trip back home to her family in Krakow when the bomb hit. They identified her because they found a fragment of her tooth in the rubble. Claire wondered how her parents had learned of her death. They couldn't get her corpse back in a coffin. There was no corpse. There weren't even ashes. Maybe one morning her parents had received a package bearing a London postmark containing that fragment of their daughter's tooth. Claire scrolled up and down the photographs. All these faces were still fresh in the memory of the public, but they would be soon forgotten. A year after the bombing, she had brought flowers, but would they do it the following year, and the year after that? She doubted it. Claire realized that people die twice, and it's the second death that's final, when no one remembers you anymore, when all that remains of your existence is wiped out, then you are completely and truly gone. She turned off the computer. From downstairs, she could hear Anthony shouting and clapping his hands in excitement. Arsenal were winning. He would be in a good mood tonight, and they were going out to celebrate his 33rd birthday. Looking out of the window, Claire could see the evening sun about to disappear behind the rooftops and chimneys of Islington, the sky red and orange, slowly turning dark. Thank you very much.
So now we have already heard the beginning of this story. Maybe anyone of you have questions?
Is this a thriller or something?
A thriller? I don't think so.
Sorry,
I didn't think about being a thriller, but if it's you know, if it has the suspense of a thriller, then that's a compliment.
So who's your readers?
But
The audience. Who's your readers?
I don't know. At the moment, it's you. But, I don't really think about a read when I'm writing a book. I just write about things that you know that matter to me, that I found important and that are necessary for me to write about. I don't really think about an audience when I write.
Did you just write whatever you want to write?
Yes, I basically write books that I would like to read myself.
But
no one else
has
written them.
It has been translated into 20
No, not this
Not
one.
this one, oh.
No, this one has been translated into Spanish, I think, and I think it's being translated at the moment into Iranian, but not so many languages like the first book.
Why did you book it for reading today?
That I don't know.
I think because it's
because
in
in
written
English,
in
because
English.
well, of course,
The only one that you have.
my mother tongue is German. I mean, as a Swiss, it's a bit special situation because we talk a certain dialect in our Switzerland, and the High German we have to learn how to tell. This is not, but this is my, you know, you could say the mother tongue, but English is even, you know, it's another languages, you know, the second one that you have to learn. And, so, but because I lived there, I think that's why I could write, you know, that language. At some point, as I said, it took me many years to be able to do so.
The first novel in English, and you have other books in English?
No, yes, the first one has been translated into English. Yeah.
How is the sales?
Not so great, actually. I think it's from all the books I've written, it's the less successful one. Which doesn't mean it's not, I think it's a bit of a shame that it hasn't been translated to German. If I would write it in German, obviously that would be a great audience, but I don't want to translate it myself. I'm still waiting for someone else to do it.
Why not? Or you don't want to translate?
That's a good question. I mean, my publisher said, you know, if you translate it, obviously he will publish it immediately, but I just think it's a waste of time. I mean, I've written in English for some reason, and I'd rather write a new book than translate my own. Maybe if I have no ideas anymore, I can translate my own books, but you know, I think that will probably never happen when I'm very old, I don't know, but it wouldn't work. I mean, it would be very interesting for me to read a translation of it, but I just want to work somewhere. Someone else has to do the work. I don't want to do the translation.
Did you get any feedback from your readers?
Well, I mean, the launch was fantastic. It was at the Swiss Embassy in London, and there were a lot of people and everything. But the publishing house is quite a small and an independent publishing house. It's not like a big. They had a big budget for marketing and everything. So I think that's one of the reasons. Nowadays it's a very competitive market, the book market, and I think for small publishing houses it can be quite difficult, to recognize it, even to have to put the books in the bookstores. I mean, I was quite happy that I had signings at some bookstores in London. For me that was a great success anyway. I mean, for me it was a success that it was published. For me it was a success that I could actually do it. So that's enough for me. I mean, it's not that I'm disappointed in any way. I think it's great that I was able to do it. And the last, as she said, that the last book was in German, and it was quite a big success. And I had good reviews and everything. And, some books do better than others is normal. I mean, I think in the life of an author, of a writer, it's it goes up and down like with anyone else.
What's the genre of the books that you have been reading?
I mean, not mostly were novels like this, but I have written one children's book as well. And I also would like to write a book, a collection of essays, like more political things. Because that's another thing that I'm interested in. I write articles as well as newspapers.
Will you plan to write in English again for the email or just Robert?
Yes, actually I've written some articles for English newspapers as well, and I hope I can carry on doing that. And, because obviously there is a much bigger audience in the English-speaking world. It's much bigger than just if you just write in German and you're not going to translate. You have, if you look at how big the world is, it's quite small. But so that's another reason. I mean, potentially you can reach so many people if you're able to write in English.
So you mostly write something that you want to write. Have you ever done something like for the mass market? That you see what people like it, and then you just want to write something for them?
Yeah, I think this should be a book for the mass market. I don't know why it's not. Why it's not sold. I really don't know. I think it's. I mean, there's one topic that in the book that a lot of people probably would be interested in is the fact that this couple cannot conceive a child. They're trying for several years, and it's just not working, and they don't know why. And statistically, infertility rates go up, increasingly go up quite dramatically actually in some countries. And one of the reasons probably is that women get older when they have children, and it's more difficult to find a partner nowadays. So this question of how to when and how to actually start a family. That's one of the topics in the book as well, and I think it's something that should, a lot of people should be interested in. But as I said, for a small publishing house in London, it just wasn't, they were just not able to promote it as well as maybe my publisher in Germany. And maybe I should translate it myself at some point.
Are you working on a new book now?
Yes, I'm working on a novel. I'm doing a lot of research now at the moment for it. I have to read a lot and also go to places and talk to certain people. And I think it will take me another 2 years to complete it.
It's in English or in German?
No, it's in German.
What is it about?
Some writers say you should never talk about something that you've not finished.
Yeah. But it is.
But it is. I mean, the main. It's about the scientist basically. about scientists and questions of religion and belief, and what we are doing here. Big questions basically. So, but he's the scientist is a physics for astrology. So it's quite difficult subject matter as well. Yeah. I have to study first to understand certain things in the universe. How the planet system works and all that. And it's very interesting. And for me, it's a fantastic time at the moment because I'm so obsessed with that scene at the moment.
So you can be next Dan Brown.
I think you have the combination because in former works, so before this work, you have lots of stories of private life, private lives, and this one you have the situation in London, and that's why it's became like thriller. But you already find other problems
because I can read the whole thing. So
yes, and I think
got it out.
I didn't have this kind of feeling, but today I share your feeling too because I read the whole book after, so I knew the story. But today, I just feel it like that too because it's suspense in the beginning. But you didn't intend to do that.
I mean, you do have to have some suspense in any story, otherwise you will not reach the next page. So it's vital. You should never bore your reader. It's very important.
Trying to find some twist.
Yeah.
Do you usually work on one book at a time? Or
Pardon?
do you usually work on one book at a time? Or one story at a time? Or
yes, the novel, and I can't write articles on the side. I always do that at the same time, but it would not work on two different books.
no. So this one, you said it took you 7 years?
Pardon?
You said it took you 7 years?
I mean, I lived in London for 8 years, and it took me to be able to write in English. I wanted to write in English for a long time. That was one of my dreams really to do that. And I tried it in the very beginning when I came to London, and it just didn't work. And it just my English wasn't good enough, and it took me much too long. And so I just had to wait, to have to live there for a long time before I was able to grab, to live the language, and so it becomes normal and completely effortless.
But you were always thinking of the story?
Yes.
7 years.
How much of the Claire character's fears reflect your own kind of fears or impressions after the 05 moment?
Quite a lot. I mean, that obviously that's quite an authentic part of the book. The opening scene, because I wasn't able to use the tube after that, and I wasn't able, and I'm still able to use a bus, really, because the bus I used to go to the library to work in the morning was the one that was blown up. So that was, the same line, and then and that morning I was in London, but I for some reason I didn't go to the library, so I'm here still. So that confused me very much, and I mean, these terrorist attacks, they were so. I really lived just one station away. I really lived in Islington, that house that I'm describing, and just one tube station away from King's Cross. And I saw all these photographs, almost every day of the people who died. They were from all over the world. There were a lot of nations involved, and all kinds of people. And I just saw all these pictures, and then I decided to take just one and read a biography, because the BBC News Day somehow they collected all the stories of these people who died, and then it just touched me very much, you know, that this young girl, for example, she's just one life, you know, but it's so pointless, isn't it? I mean, and then I was thinking about how their parents in Krakow, where they lived, you know, what did they do? They couldn't even get. I mean, it's a fact. They couldn't even get. Couldn't even do a normal funeral because there wasn't even ashes. The people were blown up. There was nothing left. I mean, just fragments of teeth. It's like in the war, you know. I think of that they have it identified soldiers in that way. You know, but nothing was there anymore. Just teeth. And it's so brutal that whole thing that I don't know. It's just something that I have to think about a long time. You know, write about it. It's like for me, writing is a way of just keeping things in your memory. It's very important for me. For me, the literature is like one big memory, and the writing is just maybe a way of keeping things alive. We shouldn't forget. But of course we do forget. We also have to forget some things, but maybe we forget too fast sometimes, you know. And maybe you should say it, but you don't have to go very far to similar things. It's everywhere.
I have a question. Because you had in the story of the pollen room or in this kind of longing as a child for her mother. But now in your new work, the anthology of short stories, and also in this one, I think there's more something like the adult long for children or long for love, being loved by children. Do you think you have changed your perspective or worldview?
You mean the
Just mean you have, because as you wrote the pollen room, you were very young.
Yes.
And this kind of love, like you wrote sought for love for mother in that story. But now this is like adult but looking for children, and for example,
yeah,
for
it's
this.
like the opposite. That's true actually. What you say, because in my first book, it's written from the perspective of a child, and the parents are getting divorced and everything, and the mother is leaving. The mother is leaving and doesn't have this attachment to the child for some reason, and it affects the child very much. And she wants to, she's looking for that love of her mother, but she cannot get it because the mother is not able to give this love, and now it's like the opposite. There's a couple they're desperate for a child they can't get. So we always look for things that we can't get. I don't know. Yes, obviously my own perspective changes, with the years. And
so what was really your inspiration to write story like this?
Anything, anything can be inspiring.
It takes 7 years. How can you keep that going on, with the same goal and inspiration?
Yes, I mean, it's an important part that I have to keep myself interested in a subject or in a certain subject that I've spent years with. Spent years describing them, and I have to live with them. Like with the new novel I'm writing about, it's a kind of obsession. I mean, you have to be a bit mad, really, to be interested in something in a way that that keeps you busy for such a long time, and it's in your mind all the time. I mean, I'm thinking about my books when I'm not writing them, and I'm just sitting in the airplane, for example, or I always think about always think about writing. You know, so I think the work is also if you don't write, you are still working on it. Even if I sleep, I dream. I dream a lot.
Imagination. Where is the best place for you to writing, sitting down, writing?
I can write anywhere. Luckily, yes, I can write in a cafe when it's very loud around me. I can write in my study at home. It doesn't matter. I can make notes in a waiting room, anywhere.
And what about your latest book, Specialist Morgan? Will it be translated into English or other languages?
No. So far there are, as far as I know, no translation to that yet.
Only my private plan.
Yes.
You're not discussing with any publisher yet?
No. I mean, it's a bit difficult with stories, But novels are better. It's easier to sell novels than collection of stories. It's a genre that is maybe not so commercial than novels.
You mean in your country?
Yes, I mean, especially especially in the German-speaking world, because in America, for example, short stories, they love short stories, or England as well.
Coming back to perspectives, so in your first novel, The Pollen Room, the main protagonist, that young woman, Jo, whose parents got divorced, is a, the lens is through her eyes.
Yeah.
Now, in your most recent short story, for instance, Sugar Rush, you have more the angle of a mother, watching the children, and going back to The Pollen Room, would you write it differently, or have you changed actually also the perspective now that you're a mother yourself?
I wouldn't be able to write this book. It's like another person has written it. I mean, yes, the books I've written are very much attached to that moment at that time when I've written them. I think sometimes even if I read work, old books, I'm surprised myself what I've done. I mean, I don't like it. Sometimes I don't even like it very much. But recently, we wanted to go to. I had to do a reading at a university, and I have chosen a book, but when we were going there, I was reading in it. I didn't like it, so I had to choose something else. Not because it was not. I mean, it was well written. It was fine, but I just sometimes it didn't. It didn't feel right, because it is just the past, You don't want to always look at what you've done in the past. It can be kind of annoying.
Do you read a lot of other books? I mean, writers.
Yes, I love reading. It's probably the thing that I like to do most, apart from writing myself, is reading. So yes, I'm constantly reading. I've always a lot of books. I read a lot of books at the same time.
Yeah.
Fiction, non-fiction, also newspapers every day. I read papers, and I'm constantly reading. I'm a book junkie, I would say. I really need literature and books around me. It's something very essential. I really not understand how people can live without books or not reading.
And also translations from other countries?
Yes, of course, yeah, but I like to read the Russian language, so I read a lot of American and English literature as well.
What kind of what genre of book that you have been reading?
I really like novels. I like stories as well, short stories. But for example, the
Romance?
action. No, the woman who got the Nobel Prize for Literature last year, Alice Munro, the Canadian writer. She has only written stories. She's never written a novel, and I really love her stories. For example, they're fantastic. I read them before she got that big prize. I always loved her stories.
I've read some introduction from the Facebook, and say that your writing style is more like Hemingway or something. How do you feel about that?
That's obviously crazy because you know he's a master of short stories. You cannot compare. It's a milestone, untouchable. I mean, I would never describe. I mean, never compare myself with someone like that.
Idol or something. Right?
Yes, he's definitely someone I very much look up to. I've learned a lot from Hemingway. I learned really a lot from him. I'm very grateful. Because I mean, he invented the short story, you know.
One more questions? I translated but not this one. I translated the Poland room, but into Thai. She asked me to share my experience as translated.
So you're feeling.
In fact, I have to say that I read all your books, and I always see. I always see. Okay, this one may be linked to this one because this is the same. Even the children's book with the teddy bear left alone is come in this story as the girl told about the teddy bear, and I thought, okay, it's from this story, and so in fact, it's what for me is very remarkable that I thought that you have grown up now because of this perspective. Because I read you from your book, like a child longing for love of mother, and then after that in between I also read you. But it's all of your novels. I like everything, but they didn't touch me much like this, both the last two, because now it's the perspective clearer. It's just like from the adult perspective, and that's why I think, okay, I see the development of you.
How did you discover her books?
Sorry?
How did you discover her book?
Her book? In the library. I was there in Switzerland at that time, and so I read some book. In fact, the first one I read was Die Fähre. It's the short stories included in the Disney one, and I liked it very much. And after that, I just read, okay, I saw your book in the library, and I read it. And then I was asked by my friend to translate a German-speaking novel. And then he suggested me a kind of a list of suggestions, and then I saw this the Poland room, and okay, I translated this one. And for me too, I think maybe as translator, I also have one point of view, just like I like to translate what I like, because I don't translate what other people like. But maybe because I don't live as translator, I have my own job because I work at university.
Some translator need money.
Yes, but I think it's also this experience, and so we are happy if I read something and I like very much, I just write it down in my language. It's just like maybe you as author, if you have some observation of life of countries, different countries, maybe you write it down, and then someday it will become your story. Right?
It's very interesting. I mean, obviously this is a gift for a writer and a translator who follows you from everything that you read. That's not normally no one is interested in what you're doing. So this is obviously is a gift to me, and yes, hopefully you can translate the last book as well and the future ones. But this is very important to be translated in other languages. It's really nice.
So you start your writing with the children's book?
No, No, I've written it once many years ago.
But,
I don't know the year exactly, but it's well on time. She knows this one. She's got the whole picture. That's stalker. Actually, I think Dora knows more about the books than I do. She can memorize it much better than I do.
and since when you change your style of writing from children's book to something grown up?
I don't know. I think that's the question.
She did write only one children's book, but the perspective of her first novel, which became very famous, is like a child perspective. And that's, I think, now 15 years past. It's like really a grown-up woman with sophisticated point of view, and that's, I think, I like this book. I like because the tone is still there. In her words, sometimes there is some melancholic tone. It's just not happy, but something we are looking for, we are longing for, but at the end it will be only an open end, not a tragedy, but it's not a direct happy end. And now we discuss with our students, as you read this, the other one at my university, and my student did have another point of view because they at times they interpreted it as a happy ending. And so that's why we are talking a lot. And I think that I like this kind of open ends because sometimes students have more hope than we than us, and then they say, okay, it's like a happy ending. It's only a moment of happiness is already happiness, but maybe we adults, we just, oh, it's not enough, yeah, so that's why we are unhappy. It's very pity that most of you cannot read all of her works because I am, and in fact I am a linguist, that's why it's not normal that I know your book or your book which is really like my personal life. Because normally I look only at the language, and so I try to, maybe I will do it later just to analyze your structure language. I don't know, because yes, a cost analysis maybe, because in fact I am interested in your participle constructions, for example. Maybe someday I may do that, but I think I will not destroy this now because of my professional. I just like to read literature, and it's very good for me to enjoy it, not only to work on it.
So you prefer a second voice in your story, even telling many of your stories? The voice. Yeah. Actually, now we'll have the first voice, second voice, third voice.
Protagonist. Yeah. Yes, I mean in this story that it's Claire who's the protagonist. It's in novel writing now. It's an older man, a scientist who's very far from myself, a completely different person. But yet I can implant some experiences and some emotions that I know myself, because we are all human beings, and we share a lot of things, even if we don't know it. We share basically every emotion you are ever having. You can be sure everyone else has it as well at the same time somewhere. Or if you're male or female, we share a lot of things in every generation and every time. This is something that is quite interesting to me. But basically, there's so many things similar, even if it doesn't look like it. You are all living novels, basically. To me, I can write about anyone, because you're born, you have problems, you have parents, maybe you have a family, you're going to die. And that affects us very deeply.
is that your own style or just the style that most writers in your country are using?
I'm not sure. I'm not reading that much Swiss literature, to be honest.
You don't read local books, local language?
No, I mean, yes, I do read a lot of, German novels, but mainly from I have to be honest, mainly from authors who are dead already. You know, I probably read a lot. I read a lot of classics still. You know, I do like. I also like to read books several times. If I like them, I read them again and again. I'm not really looking for something new because everything has been said already. You know, we are just rewriting and rewriting the same. It's just one big book. Maybe you're working on.
People just pick some classic there and put together.
Yeah. And I've been asked that question actually, if there is an author I'm waiting for the next book, but I'm not waiting because I'm convinced that everything has been said, you know, and some things have been said in a way that are, you know, you can really not talk it. It's perfectly done, it's well done, it's felt, you know, it's honest, and I'm always looking for that, you know, for authenticity, honesty, something that really touches me. You know, I want to touch myself if I read a book. I don't want someone telling me what I have to think or what I have to feel. You know, I don't like that.
Yeah, that's right.
I would like to share something with you. As translator for Thai, we always have problems to translate the word I. And I did also have this problem as I translated your book, because the relationship between mother and the child, Joe, was not that good. And then we discussed a lot with my editor, which one should I use for Joe as I, and we didn't find any, and so we dropped. It's very interesting, and that's why I think your question is very interesting, because this kind of view we always have in Thai, because if you read something, you just think this is a man or woman, and because you will have to use other word in your mind.
Because when you are the second voice, you talk to this first voice, it's going to be different from the third voice. And I can understand that situation, the black situation between editor and writer.
That's a very special.
You translate?
No, I'm an editor.
As reader too.
I've done translation before.
Okay.
But for mass market, not like. Yeah, work from Europe is more like philosophy. I don't know, maybe I should read more from
In some of your novels or short stories, space, geographical space is a very important point. For instance, in The Sky is Changing, as we heard in London after July 2005. What's the likelihood of one of your future stories or novels actually playing in Thailand now that you've been here 4 days and 7 years ago? Yeah.
Well, I must say, the second time I've been to Bangkok, and it's a very interesting place. There are a lot of things going on, you know, and even if you don't see them, I can feel it. I like urban spaces anyway. I've always been fascinated by them, you know, the big places where so many lives, you know, are going at the same time, you know. There's so many things happening, and so yes, Bangkok is definitely a place where easily sets a novel, you know. It's a very nice background, a very rich background as well. And I'm actually waiting for someone writing, you know, what I write, you know. I mean, I've been thinking about that. Why there are not that many I really don't know one Thai writer. It's a shame, you know. I mean, why isn't there a novel about Bangkok being translated into a lot of languages like, you know, Berlin, you know, everyone has written a book about Berlin. I mean, it's forced me now. And I really would like to read a book, you know, that's set in Bangkok. Yeah, it's, you know, it's one generation.
I attend books, many events around the world, and it's very difficult to do the translation from here and then travel to Europe or something.
Yeah.
Because from the statistic, people there don't read translated novels. They prefer read local languages. Even in London, I have an editor friend in London, and she said it's very shocking because not many people reading translated novels or translated books except Bible.
Yeah. Interesting.
It depends on the reader.
Yeah, that's true actually.
But the books from Europe come here.
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah, it's just different. I mean, everything from the English-speaking world is being translated in unbelievable rubbish. You know, everything is translated, but not the other way around. It's not fair.
Even Berlin in literature was discussed at the Chulalongkorn University 2 weeks ago. There was a big conference on the topic Berlin as literature.
I mean, Berlin is everyone, you know, was waiting after when the war went down. Everyone said, now where's the authors writing the Berlin book, you know, the Berlin novel, and there are now thousands and thousands of Berlin novels. I mean, I've actually written a novel that's set in Berlin myself. And, obviously, it's a very interesting place, but there are other interesting places too in the world.
There's a lot of books written, you know, on like based on this location here in Bangkok, but not like really good literature. You know, a lot of like thrillers or those kinds of like airport literature.
But still, there will be at some point there will be a very good book. Because it's inevitable. At some point, someone will really write something very truthfully, you know, very authentic about his place, and it will be. And I'm looking forward to it. Someone's got to work.
More questions? Okay.
That was very nice. You know, sometimes I had readings. There were, you know, a few hundred people, 400 or 500 people, and sometimes it's like this. You know, and you know, I actually prefer it. It's much nicer to talk. You can sit with, you know, 2 or 3 people, then just have a crowd. It's dark and you can see. You know.
I think it's very the reading room, because the reading room must be cozy and you read and then you can discuss, and that's not. Sometimes you don't want to read in a mass, but just in a nice atmosphere. Yes.
So I really appreciate that you coming, and thank you very much.
For me too, I think the place here is very nice and it's very nice to be here. Thank you very much.